On the last day of the coldest January London has experienced for years, Their Majesties the King and Queen and the two princesses set off on the first stage of their voyage to the Union of South Africa, passing as they drove to Waterloo Station Big Ben, whose steady chimes have echoed in countless South African homes throughout the war years. In spite of the intense cold which cancelled the originally planned semi-state procession, crowds had gathered along the route to wave the royal family an affectionate farewell. Every single member of those half-frozen crowds wishing, no doubt, that they too could be transported this bitter January afternoon to the fabulous sunshine of South Africa. To the princesses, like any other girls of their age, this is a great adventure, and they could hardly wait for the royal car to stop before they jumped out eagerly, ready to begin the business of leave-taking. Then the time for departure had arrived, and the King and Queen and the two princesses and their entourage turned towards the royal train, which, drawn proudly by the famous locomotive Lord Nelson, was to carry them swiftly across the snow-covered southern counties of England to the South Jetty Pier at Portsmouth. His Majesty and the Queen are piped aboard, as the Sovereign has been piped aboard his men of war for centuries. This is the first royal tour Their Majesties will have made since they visited Canada the year war broke out, and their first voyage to the Southern Hemisphere since, exactly 20 years ago, the battle cruiser Renown carried them to Australia as the Duke and Duchess of York. On the quarterdeck, the Royal Guard of the Royal Marines awaits the King's inspection, their helmets whiter than the snow covering Portsmouth, and as stiffly at attention as though they had been frozen immobile in the Great Freeze. Covered lightly with a mantle of crisp snow that fell during the night, Vanguard looms up through the gloomy twilight of early morning, light so dull as almost to defeat our cameramen. At 7:20, the great ship is moving almost imperceptibly away from the South Jetty, and a happy company of dockyard mateys who'd braved the weather wave the last farewell Vanguard and her royal passengers will receive from the shores of England. Silently, Vanguard moves into the gloom towards the Sally Port, through which innumerable of England's naval heroes have sailed to their destiny. This, exactly 4.5 centuries ago, was the spectacle that met the eyes of Bartholomew Dias and his ship's company as they battled their way around the Cape of Storms. These are the Drakensberg. Towering 2/3 of a mile high at their western extremity is Table Mountain itself, rearing up sheer like a precipitous wall, flat as a board and 2 miles long. Spread in a great half circle around the shores of Table Bay and secure in the safety under the slopes of Table Mountain lies Cape Town, first city of the Union and gateway to all southern Africa. It was to this city, third in the Commonwealth, that on the 17th of February, the battleship Vanguard carried the first reigning British sovereign ever to set foot in the 37-year-old Union of South Africa. And in glorious sunshine, the citizens of Cape Town turn out to greet the monarch who is King of South Africa just as much as he is King of Great Britain. His Majesty, in the light tropical uniform of an Admiral of the Fleet, sets foot on South African soil for the first time. He is greeted by his representative, Governor-General Van Zyl, Mrs. Van Zyl, Field Marshal Smuts, the Prime Minister, General Sir Pierre van Groeneveld, Chief of the General Staff and first man to fly from Britain to South Africa, and Major General Mitchell Baker, Honorary ADC to His Majesty. The King takes a royal salute for the first time on South African territory and inspects the South African Naval Guard of Honor. granite and red brick walls of South Africa's Parliament House, standing on Cape Town's Oak Line Government Avenue, His Majesty the King, within 4 days of his arrival in the country, launches a unique session of the Union Parliament. And the citizens of Cape Town, both spectators and the Guard of Honour, have turned out for an event no South African has ever before witnessed, a British monarch delivering the speech from the throne inside a South African Parliament. The ceremony is a simpler version of the one practiced at Westminster. The King, after driving around the city echoing with ovation after ovation, entered the Senate House at noon precisely. The speech from the throne, which was shorter than usual, did not enter into detail regarding any measure of the government's programme. When it had been spoken in English, the King called upon the President of the Senate to read the Afrikaans version. And then their Majesties returned to Government House to prepare for setting out on their long 10,000-mile tour of the Union and Rhodesia. As the royal party leaves the city, they look past the pilot train towards HMS Vanguard, their late home, set against the backcloth of Table Mountain and Lion's Head. The royal discovery of the vast country that lies beyond the rectangular pattern of Cape Town's streets and avenues is beginning. At Oudtshoorn, young citizens who owe no allegiance, only gratitude to the King, are presented. They are Polish refugees in scout, guide and national costume whom the war had driven from their native land. At the Rietvlei farm at Leroux near Oudtshoorn, the King, Queen and their daughters meet Basie Meyer the farmer and the first ostriches they've ever seen outside a zoo. These ostrich chicks are small fry at the moment, but they'll grow to be nearly 8 feet high and the fastest thing on land on 2 legs. Ostriches would sell at a tremendous price in Britain nowadays, for they lay an egg that's the equivalent of about 2 dozen hen's eggs. And in spite of the old wives' tale, ostriches don't bury their heads in the sand. Anyway, they weren't doing it on this occasion, for an ostrich lives a pretty dull life, supplying debutantes with feathers, and today there was far too much to be seen, and you didn't need a periscope to see it if you were an ostrich.